What? Greetings, fellow Watford fans. Omar here, and it's time for another edition of the Orns 10-minute take on Watford 1, Cardiff City 2. Yes, Watford's long unbeaten run at the Vic has come to a close. And look, it was going to end at some point. Watford were going to lose a home match at some point in the next year. And unfortunately, it happened to be today. And this one is not one that you can have too many complaints about. But at the same time, Watford could have got through this game differently and could have made it at least into 2025 with their long unbeaten streak intact. But the way they played this game, there was no chance of that. Just 56 seconds in, they found themselves a goal down, and that really set the tone for the entirety of this contest. Watford did not have a chance to settle into the game. Cardiff City, who was second from bottom to start this game, before they kicked the ball, made a very, very good accounting of themselves. They've played probably the best football that any team has played at Vicarage Road, obviously in these last 17 tries. And they deserve to win. Cardiff City were much better, streets ahead of us in every department. Defense, goalkeeping. I mean, look, the goalkeeper didn't have to make a single save today for Cardiff City, and that is really telling when you are an away goalkeeper and have not a single save to make the entire 98-minute match that you played. Cardiff were better in midfield, defense, goalkeeping, obviously up top as well, as Callum Robinson scored twice to get all 3 points, well deserved for Cardiff, who took the lead, as I said, after 56 minutes. And Watford didn't have any answers to Cardiff at all. The defending was awful for both goals, especially the second goal, where Watford were really carved open. Ryan Porteous really was not on the same planet as Watford fans and the rest of the Watford players today. Although, listen, it's not just Ryan Porteous. The whole team played poorly. Georgie, however, did get his goal. Watford only had 12 minutes of sustained pressure in the entire match, and it was from the 26th minute through that 38th minute goal in the first half that Georgie and Watford played perhaps their best football, if you can call it that. It was that persistence from Watford that earned them the equaliser, but it was that sloppiness from Watford that saw them trail again just 4 minutes later as Robertson completed his daily double with that second goal in the 42nd minute. And that was the winning goal of the contest. They went in at half time that way and they ended at full time that way. Watford just did not have any urgency or desire in this game at all. They made too many mistakes. The character was not there. The players were not on the same page. There were passes from some players that weren't even reaching their fellow teammates just 3 yards or less away. It was that sloppy. It was that poor. It was that unfocused. And unfortunately for Watford, there just was not any real hunger. You didn't see the hunger in this game. It seemed like the players just did not have the desperation that Cardiff showed as a team in the bottom two. And Cardiff came into this game desperate. They hadn't won a game for a long time. They hadn't won since April away from home. I mean, Cardiff had been in a world of hurt, and they'd come into this game with the fearlessness, with the desire, with the tenacity, and with the confidence, all things that Watford lacked in this game today at the Vic. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was because it was that close to 2025. I don't know. Maybe it was because the turkey and the Christmas stuffing and all the rest of it probably has got to Watford. I don't know what it is of the players who do celebrate Christmas and the players who don't celebrate Christmas. I don't know what happened to them either. It was just one of those games where nobody did anything right, really. Georgie with the goal was perhaps the only one. Vata was lively enough. And look, I had not known at the time I made these comments earlier on the post match that both Imran Louza and Rocco Vata had been nursing an injury or had some kind of injury, both knee injuries, which is a very troubling thing to learn several hours hence. But both of them were subbed for obviously very good reasons in that case. Now, I had not had that information at the time on the post match, but certainly now that I do have that information, it does make sense, obviously, that you sub players who have knee injuries or certainly some issue with their knees. You do not want to take a chance with a knee. The knee issues, oh my goodness, in life as well as in football, those are critical, and you really want to be careful with those. So I completely understand now why Clevs uh, sub both of them off. And so anything that I said in the post match regarding the substitutions, I can completely invalidate those right now because clearly Tom Cleverley did the right thing in subbing off those two players, as influential as they were in this contest. And yes, even though Loser had a yellow card, and I know players can play through yellow cards, at least some Watford players can. When you've got knee injury situation or a knee problem, you cannot mess about with that. We've seen this with TDB already this season. God knows when he'll be back on the pitch for Watford. But what you're seeing now are two things that are troubling. Make that three things that are troubling. We struggle away from home. That's been obvious all season. We are getting worse with our defense, going back to where our defense was earlier in the season when we shipped four at Norwich, three at Luton, and shipped three at Preston. Very concerning there that the defense has now gone backwards because just a few weeks ago we had gone almost three full games without conceding a single goal. Now all of a sudden we've conceded, what is it, 5 goals now in the last three contests that we've played. And that's how we ended the year of 2024. So that would concern you as well. And the appetite, the other thing that would concern you is the way we start these games, even home and away. We have started these games poorly. We've been conceding these goals early. In the last three games now, we've conceded a goal in the first 10 minutes. And, this would really give you some pause. 10-minute goal conceded in the last game against Portsmouth, 9-minute goal conceded in the game against Burnley, and now in this contest in the first 56 seconds. This is a very troubling development, and it's not like it's just begun. This has been going on all season long and even into previous seasons where we have conceded goals very early. We have not started these games well. So those are things that you'd be concerned about with Watford, and also just the lack of commitment to winning the game. And we know that you cannot turn these games on and off. You cannot look at Cardiff and go, well, they're the bottom two. We'll just turn it on when we feel like it. You can't do that because, as I've said many times in the post match, these teams at the bottom of the table or near the bottom of the table will come into these games desperate because they know very well at Christmas time and thereabouts, if you're in the bottom three, it can spell trouble for you. It's not a good marker for what can happen the rest of the season. And now at the halfway point, that's where Cardiff and Watford are, both having to play each other again in just over 2 weeks' time. So Watford and Cardiff will be very familiar with each other. And I think Watford will have a lot of lessons to learn after this game because one team wanted this game and the other team were very indifferent to the game. You could see the hesitation in the Watford players when they were going forward. They'd stop the play instead of moving and having a bit of devil about them. A lot of the attacks they had got stopped because they stopped themselves and they did not bomb forward. There were a few times when LaRusso was down that left wing flank doing some good things, and there was a good couple of times for Vata also, but many of the other times players in the Watford shirt would stop and pass the ball backwards or pass it sideways instead of going incisive and bombing into the box, forcing things to happen. Watford hesitated a lot, moved the ball about, but then were very cautious about the movement as if they were afraid to make a mistake. I think what Watford need to do in these games, especially at the Vic, is be much more fearless, take more chances. And I'm not just talking about taking more shots at goal. I'm talking about daring yourself to do some things in front of goal. Take some more of that, the onus to take on a player that you are, seeing as your opposition. You have to go at these defenders. You have to force them on their heels. You can't just stop in front of a defender. You've got to force the defender to defend you. And what Watford have not done a lot of is try to go past that man in their defense. They turn around and then they pass the ball in front of the defense, which makes it easy for Cardiff, and it made it very easy for Cardiff in this game. Cardiff just parked their banks of four and did what they had to do. Cardiff were exceptional defensively in this game. You cannot deny that. They did a very, very good job. There's a couple of players in particular, I don't remember their names, who did a really good job in the low block, took a lot of blocks from shots. They were able to clear the danger. They got their body in between the ball and the goal. They were very protective of their goalkeeper. That's the reason why he didn't have a single save to make, as well as the fact that Watford were just tepid in front of goal. Daniel Jefferson, it's going to be a very difficult time for him now in these games. He's had a very difficult time already, but he missed another sitter in this game at the Vic. In the second time in 4 days now in front of the Rookery, he has absolutely laid an egg with a sitter that was it was harder to miss, but Daniel Jefferson took the harder path and missed the goal completely. And he was literally a yard or so off the line, off the goal line. It was just one of those incredibly troubling and, quite frankly, painful moments. And while I do have a little bit of sympathy for him, because he obviously is someone who looks very fragile in confidence and looks fragile in general, he had his head in his hands on the floor, as did a number of other Watford players, had their heads in their hands after that miss. I don't know how he missed from there, and I'm sure he's still trying to figure that out as well. But Daniel Jefferson, unfortunately, has just not been the tonic for Watford that I actually thought he was going to be when I had found out that Watford had brought him in as a loan signing. Bournemouth, rather, quite frankly, knew exactly what they were doing when they offloaded him. And I would be surprised if Bournemouth even use him again in their campaign. Do you think Bournemouth at this point in the Premier League season are looking to use the services of Daniel Jefferson at this point? It's been a very unhappy time for him. And again, I do feel some sympathy for him because I think he's a decent person. But again, decency doesn't pay the rent and it does not score you the goals. At some point, you do have to attack the goal and dive in and get those goals. I mean, it's hard to do in football. It's the hardest thing to do in football. But when you've got a sitter, sitters are right there to be pounced on. And a goal scorer with confidence would have done that. Rajovic would have done that. We know that. Bio, for goodness sakes, would have done that as well, even though he's missed a few sitters in his time. But the thing is, Bio has a bit more goodwill with some of the Watford faithful, even some of those Watford faithful who aren't necessarily high on Bio. At least they can bank a bit of goodwill for him because he's actually scored a load of goals. He's scored some goals this season, and he works hard for the team. Whereas you really don't see enough of that from Daniel Jefferson. And besides, obviously, he's not scored in the 4 months that he's been at the club. So that makes it very difficult for a number of Watford fans, I think, to have much patience or empathy for him. I'm one of those who actually does have some empathy for him, but patience, maybe, maybe not there. I'd probably say no. I don't know what Tom Cleverley's going to do when it comes to Daniel Jefferson, but I think Daniel Jefferson should end up easing his way out of the Vic, if not in January, but certainly after the season's gone. I think it is very safe to say that Daniel Jefferson will no longer be a part of Watford. It's a shame because I think he could have been much better. And certainly, I think had he scored today, that's at least something to start 2025 or to go into 2025 with. But look, this isn't solely about Daniel Jefferson any more than it is about the absence of Quadwell Barr. Barr is out of the game. He was out of the game. He got suspended because of what he did at the end of the game on Boxing Day. But that's not the reason Watford lost. Watford have played like this with Barr in the starting lineup. So it's got nothing to do with Barr being out. Of course, we could have used him. That's obvious that we could have used Quadwell Barr today, and that might have helped us. But that does not guarantee that you win a game, and it doesn't guarantee that you get a point. As I said, Barr has been in these starting lineups, and Watford have still lost. They've still played the way they played today. They have, throughout this season, fallen behind at home in at least three other contests I can think of, including the Coventry game and the Derby game, and of course the Portsmouth game. Watford were behind in all of those games before they got points or victories. And so, at some point, the well was going to run dry today. And we only had a couple of players, as I've said, who really were at it. The most of the other players were not. Cardiff kept their shape very well in this game. There was not a time I can remember where Cardiff were really cut apart in this game, carved open in their defense. Their defense was very disciplined. Watford have a lot of defensive work to do, and I think that they will need a clinic on that You've got to put Sierralta in these games to start them now. Sierralta came in and I thought did an admirable job keeping Cardiff off the score sheet in the second half once Ryan Porteous was out of the match. But the other concern now is the injuries to both Rocco Vata and Imran Louza, which means that this squad is very thin, and which also means that January is probably going to be a bit busier at the Vic than we might expect. Although we would like it to be busy, January usually is not a period of time in the transfer market where you get big dividends. But Watford are going to need to get some players in here. They've got a number of injury issues. TDB, Kevin Kebbins not played really much of anything. Got the injuries to Vata and Louza, or at least precautionary issues with them on their knees. Those are concerns. All of those are concerns. And with Ogbonna, who's started there on the bench today, but did not get into this game, you see where the urgency is and where the issues are. I actually think, having said all of this, and despite the poor performance today from Watford, and they deserve to be beaten, and they probably deserve to be beaten more like 4-1 rather than 2-1. I think with all of the things that Watford have gone through, they still need some players, and they still they still have got some players they need to get back. But here's the thing that I think that Watford fans should look at, which they're not going to necessarily in the few hours after Watford lost, but really should look at once the dust settles on this game. And that is that Watford, again, went 9.5 months without defeat at the Vic. That is an astonishingly good record. Watford in their home matches over the last 3 or 4 seasons have been absolutely dreadful. So to see this 9.5+ month run go on as long as it did for that time without a defeat at the Vic is very, very good, very impressive under Tom Cleverley, the new king of the Vic. So you knew this run was going to come to an end at some point. You would have probably liked to see it come to an end, perhaps against the likes of a team like Sheffield United, a team that's really up there at the top fighting. But again, with Watford, who knows? I can see us bouncing back and winning at QPR, and I can also see us doing something good against Sheffield United. We often do play up or down to level our competition. We've had a hard time breaking down teams at the bottom end of the table. We saw that with Hull. We saw that with Plymouth. We saw that with Preston when they were in the bottom three a couple of months ago when we played them. We've seen that with a number of these teams in the bottom 6 or 7. And so, same thing with QPR when they're in the bottom three when we played them at the end of last month. So, look, this has happened. Watford have a lot of issues here to work out, and they will. But to be in seventh place, halfway point of the season, is beyond the vast majority of Watford fans' wildest expectations. I had them finishing eighth this season, and here they are in seventh, knocking on the playoff door. And the only reason they're seventh is because Middlesbrough and Burnley played out to a 0-0 draw in the late game. That's the only reason. Other than that, Watford have been very, very good, much more improved, notably improved, obviously, over last season. To be seventh and really on goal difference behind Middlesbrough at this point is really excellent. That's a great accomplishment. And Tom Cleverley and the backroom staff and the Watford players, this men's first team, and the Watford fan base at large should really be looking at that as a badge of pride and some optimism that we have a lot more to learn and a lot more good things to do. And we will do them. It's just a question of will we crack that top six? I have my thoughts about that and I've made them clear. But we have a lot of good things going on despite this particular result to close out the calendar year. We've got some good things going on here. 37 points after 23 games is an exceptional, if I can say that properly, an exceptional total for Watford when you consider where they were. We barely had 37 points or so last season for the whole season, I think. I'll have to go look that up. But we didn't do that well last season. We finished around 15th, 16th, 17th, whatever it was. We were not very good last season. And so to be in 10th, 7th place, that's a great accomplishment. We've taken more than half the total points available to us. And if you double that amount of points, it takes us to 74, which will bring us right around 6th or 7th in the championship in terms of the playoffs. Probably right there on the door of the playoffs, I think, when you get 74 points. Watford have to start to, if they're going to get to 74 points or more, they're going to have to start winning away games. And the first one would be QPR on January 1st of 2025. That is the key. Start the second half of this campaign, right? You've got the game in hand that you've got now against Cardiff. Focus on getting revenge against them in just about 2 weeks' time in South Wales, which I think Watford will actually end up doing. And make sure that you beat Queen's Park Rangers on Wednesday. This is a critical game now for Watford because after that it's Sheffield United at the Vic. And you don't want to start having a losing streak at home because then the confidence really starts to drain away. And the bottom line is you want to avoid that as well. But Watford, if you look back at the 2024 portion of this season, it's been a very strong one. It's been a very impressive one. We see leaders on the pitch. We see people like a Matty Pollock who's assumed a mantle of leadership. You see Imran Louza, what a great comeback story he's been. You see the likes of Kwadwo Bar, who is a very positive force on this team, despite the fact that he got sent off at the very end of the game against Portsmouth. You see those kinds of players who are absolutely hopes and give us hope and reason to hope for the second half of the season. Rocco Vata is another player who I think is showing up and showing his maturity. And so, look, these are all, and other players too, but those are the ones I can think of at the moment who have been real positive signposts for this Watford men's first team. Paul Robinson in the coaching staff has done a very good job. They all have in the coaching staff. And Tom Cleverley has done an excellent job as the Watford head coach. And the team is playing for him despite today's result. The team is playing for him and generally are putting in an effort and putting in a shift. So overall, losing just one at home in the last 17 games, yeah, that's a really, really, look, that's just in the last 18 games rather. That's a really good thing. One loss, I mean, and that just came in this game. So after 17 unbeaten, Watford finally fall to a defeat in their 18th game at the Vic since Tom Cleverley arrived in March. I don't think you can ask for much better than that. Now, all we need to do is to continue to consolidate the way we play. We've got to improve on that. And of course, we certainly have to start winning away from home because we're not going to get anywhere near the playoffs if we can't start winning these games away from home, especially a game like the one against QPR, which won't be easy, but I think it's one that Watford can get 3 points from. We will see if indeed they do. But today, they were nowhere near deserving of a point at all against Cardiff. This has been the Orns 10-minute take.